Alrighty, everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of Library of Awakening. Today's episode, we're going to open up a book that dives into a world most people rarely study: secret societies, psychological warfare, symbolism, and the hidden mechanisms used to influence human perception. The book is Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare by Michael Hoffman. Whether you agree with the author's conclusions or not, this is the kind of book that I believe belongs in the Library of Awakening, not because you should blindly accept everything written inside it, but because it forces you to investigate ideas. So, as always, we encourage you to read, we encourage you to research, we encourage you to question, and we encourage you to compare sources. We don't agree with everything that we read in the books. We're again just here to recommend books to you all. What you do with the information is, of course, entirely up to you after we recommend the books. So, this is the book we're going to dive into today. I read through the first chapter. I have one highlight in it. I'm going to skip through it because I want to get through chapter, I believe it is 2 and 3 today. And it is the flattery first principle of mind control, and Satan is the ape of God. These are the two chapters that I'm going to attempt to get through today. Here's the book, Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare by Michael Hoffman. I came across this book from yesterday's live where we were scrolling through the elite agendas and global power structure section in the CyberX Discord inside the Library of Awakening. And I circled back to it and read the first chapter and then thought it might be of interest. There are so many books inside this section. Honestly, I think this is probably one of the biggest sections inside Library of Awakening. So many juicy books that I definitely want to revisit. I'm not going to be able to make TikTok shorts on these books, but what I am going to start doing is picking apart some of these books and reading them on YouTube and then reading them on TikTok live. TikTok shorts, I've come to realize, like to censor certain things. And a lot of these books will not be allowed on TikTok shorts. There's no way. Like, half these books will get taken down. So I'll read them on TikTok live and we'll see how that goes. I don't know if TikTok live can pick up on certain things. We'll try to get away with it. But most of the times that I post these books in this section on TikTok shorts, they get taken down or the video gets removed for, violations or whatever. So we'll see. But this is where I came across this book. So shout out to the CyberX researchers. Let's dive in. The only thing that I wanted to highlight and go on the first chapter was this right here. And I'm going to highlight as we progress through this. So nature or gnosis, divine creation and its counterfeit. Again, I apologize in advance if I stumble on my words or I mispronunciate things. I'm only human. Let me rekindle my thought process and gather my footing, and then we will continue on. In a study of mind control and psychological warfare, it is not enough to simply review the latest technology of creation, the most recent gadgetry and techno junk littering the hardware and supply deposits of governments and cults. Far more dangerous than these appliances is the praxis behind them, the underground current which informs the modern project and this modern era. For life in our modern era is little more than an open air mind control laboratory where a form of human alchemy has emerged to transform the mass of targeted recipients, targeted merely by virtue of their beings, urban dwellers, plugged into the electronic and digital pageantry of establishment systems of things. Holy shit. That paragraph was nuts. What a slap in the face. I'll highlight that. And what sort of creature inhabits the modern domain? Who is the modern man? The puppet masters say he is the smartest, most advanced individual to ever strut the planet, the most relatively liberated being in history. But Louis Ferdinand Kalin said it well. What does the modern public want? It wants to go down on its knees before money and before crap. The public have been trained to do this by two principal methods: direct speaking and archetypal messages of pure terror, and psychic driving, as the CIA's Dr. Ewan Cameron termed it. Encoded in massively publicized lone nut mass murders and the sinister flattery heaped upon them by their masters in the cult of civilization and progress. The acid test of a human being's freedom and will protect the quality of his life lies in a person's attitude towards his oppressor. What is modern man's attitude toward Will Street, or excuse me, let me read that. What is modern man's attitude towards Wall Street and the bankers, towards Dan Rather and the ignorance bestowing media and advertising man, toward Lincoln and Truman, FDR and Reagan, George Bush and Johnny Carson, Exxon and Monsanto? As one writer has observed, the most amazing thing about the American people is that they are constantly defending the worst betrayers. Oh, this video would definitely get taken down if I made a short of this shit. Who then is the modern man? He is a mind bomb patsy sprinkled throughout. Excuse me, let me reread that. He is a mind bomb patsy who gets his marchings and his orders from Twilight language, keywords sprinkled throughout his news and current events, even as he dances to the tune of the elite managers of human behavior. He scoffs with great derision He scoffs with great derision at the idea of the existence and operation of a technology of mass mind control emanating from the media and government. Modern man is much too smart to believe anything as superstitious as that. Modern man is the ideal hypnotic subject, puffed up on the idea that he is the crown of creation. He vehemently denies the power of the hypnotic's control over him, even as his head bobs up and down on a string. This book just makes me want to crack the fuck up every time I read it. Because literally, when you go out in public and shit, you can see it. This is exactly what is happening right now. Zombies just walking around. What we observe in the population today are the three destructive symptoms of a person's whose mind are controlled by alien forces. One, amnesia, i.e., the loss of memory. Two, abulia, i.e., the loss of will. Three, apathy, i.e., the loss of interest in events vital to one's own health and survival. Amnesia, abulia, and apathy are nearly universal among us today and gaining a greater foothold with each passing day. I 110% agree with that. Japanese philosopher George Osawa stated that there was only one incurable sickness: arrogance. If a patient does not regard himself as sick, he cannot submit to a cure. The arrogant man does not need to see; he already sees almost everything, and what he thinks he has yet to learn, he believes. The experts will one day show him. Who are these experts? They are not really doctors of the soul. They do not have the man's interest at heart. They are, in fact, his worst enemies, his most cunning manipulators, who lead him to do their bidding like any slave master since Egypt. What is going on, team? I haven't even looked down on my phone. I totally forgot I went live on TikTok. What's up, team? How are you guys feeling today? Yesterday, you all were hitting off on some really good books. So let's continue on. Flattery, the first principle of mind control. Why then does he revere them? Because they flatter him? This is the first secret of mass mind control and can be observed as the foundation stone of virtually every false religion, party, cult, philosophy, system, and training. How can modern man free himself when he is told that he is already a demigod, that the problem lies only in finding pure enough economic or political systems worthy of his high minded brilliance? If we look closely, we will see that his mind control principle is so basic and simple, it is almost stupidly so, to the point that we marvel that anyone would be seduced by it. But it is all a matter of attention. As we saw in the parable of the mountebank and the clown, arrogant hypnopatsies have been told by their masters that they are demigods, and demigods are never deceived or distracted. They're too smart. And by their arrogant self satisfaction, they blind themselves to the simplicity of the device that ensnares them, and that is when the real sales pitch begins. What the alchemical managers have bred over a millennium is a human race of the most wretched stupidity and ignorance unraveled in thousands of years. These blind slaves are told they are free and highly educated, even as they march behind signs that would cause any medieval peasant to run screaming away from them in panic stricken terror. Damn, this book is shitting on people right now. Oh man. It's like imagine if you got in an argument with somebody and they just started dumping these on you as like they're shit talking against you. It would be mind blowing. You wouldn't have a choice except to sit and listen. Like, damn, this dude's going off right now on me. The symbols that modern man embraces with the naive trust of an infant will be, oh my God, imagine calling somebody a fucking infant. Oh, this book is savage. The symbols that modern man embraces with the naive trust of an infant would be tantamount to billboards reading, "This way to your death and enslavement." That reminds me of the freaking movie They Live. You all have seen that movie, right? If you haven't seen that movie, They Live, it's like in the late 1900s. Let me see what year that movie was made. They Live, 1980 something, right? 1988. They Live. That's what this paragraph reminds me over. The symbols that modern man embraces with the naive trust of an infant would be tantamount to billboard reading, "This way to your death and enslavement." That's literally a scene in They Live, 110%. To the understanding of traditional peasants of antiquity, I doubt any medieval man would have much difficulty in feeling a sense of overwhelming foreboding in the face of the Soviet hammer and sickle symbol. Yet most modern literate people obviously don't know a thing about what that symbol actually represents, except on the most profound level as the implements of the farmer and the worker. The sickle symbolizes Saturn, also known as Kronos. Saturn, or as the Greeks called it, Demetrius or Demiurgos. Demiurgos. I think I said that correctly. Demiurgos. We'll go with that. The operating engineer of the universe, as opposed to the creator of that universe. In the reign of Saturn, we see exorbitant building and modeling activities, and this is reflected in the Masonic reference to their god as the big builder or architect. This sounds reasonably attractive. Many of us can appreciate magnificent buildings and splendid projects along those lines, but as usual, there is more to it than this. This the Saturnian Masonic edifice complex ultimately is building against the grain, against nature, though at the beginning in the early eras, nature's forces are manipulated with a knowledge which requires the greatest intimacy with her ways. As reflected in the various megalithic structures in the British Isles, Europe, and ancient America, there is a beauty, simplicity, and power in this early technology, and modern enthusiasts have mistaken the knowledge and sensitivity to natural forces intrinsic to this technology as indicative of a positive force at work. Actually, with some crucial exceptions, the rise of the megaliths marked the rise of the Hermetic Academy into the dominant physical phase. The theory is that the megaliths pinned down natural forces, helping to subdue nature's most savage furies. We marvel today at the Hoover Dam, but that symbol, laid in construction, is but a crude parody of the technology of the megaliths, which helped to dam the wildest forces of nature. The construction of the megaliths, heralded by New Age types as marvels of ancient ingenuity and cooperation with nature, are actually the first physical evidence of the end of Eden, of that period on earth when humanity lived as the servants and friends of God's natural creation, as nomads and the hunter gatherers. Damn, this shit just got deep. The era of modern enthusiasts for what they regard as the magical Merlensky or harmonious time of the Druids in Stonehenge is ignorance of the fact that the historical period they idolized was itself immersed in a tempering of technology and materialism, which essentially marked a revolutionary break with the natural order of things. According to John Mitchell, the first revolution of Olympus marks the first deviation from the primeval ways of men, presided over by Kronos, otherwise Saturn. This revolution marks the end of man's Edenic relationship with the natural world. Henceforward, man is alienated from nature by means of the Satyrian Sith, which symbolizes the sense of separation from God's natural creation that man experienced after the fall. Man became, that is going to be a big word, Peregrin, peregrin, peregrination. We're going to go with that. Man began his peregrination away from the Eden through his conceit or his conceit that he would become as God. I gotta fucking look up how to pronounce that word. Let's be real. I'll come back to that. I'm highlighting it. Yet as soon as he left the divine plan for the occult process, his stated objective became the Kabbalistic tikkun olam, or repair of the world. Via the intervention and implosion of human brain power, the very egomaniacal device that caused the separation from God's natural Eden in the first place. Repair of the world, indeed, a world of the Kabbalists or Kabbalists, had only just reunited. After the Satyrian division, Hermetic man saw himself as separate and inevitably above nature, though always quick to identify himself as nature's benign shepherd. This mighty occult shepherd king figure has emerged in history under the form of Arthur, Merlin, Pendragon, and Prester John. He is the personification of the manipulation of nature by secret technology on behalf of a secret hierarchy, which, if known at all, is always careful to present itself as the supreme friend of divine creation. If the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, what the fuck is this? No. If the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, that is to say, the literary alteration of man's circumstances of living solely upon God's bounty and providence, was the result of satanic intervention, why has it not dawned on us that civilization is itself satanic? In the Hermetic Masonic tradition, the secret identity of Satan is the cosmic force represented in occult lore as emanating from the star Sirius, the so called dog star, Alpha Canis Majoris. In the secret tradition of the Freemasons, Sirius is overwhelmingly identified with a single primary attribute, the bringing of civilization to Earth. The heirs of this magical current were saluted by the Illuminists, or alumnus. The heirs of this magical current were saluted by the Illuminists and master alchemists. Commonius, in his 1668 book, The Way of Light. Oh, we're going to get that one. Let me write that shit down. The Way of Light, 1668. We'll have it by the end of the day. Dedicated to the first scientific organization in Western history. As a matter of fact, watch this. Let's see if we can get it right now. The Way of Light, the Way of Light, the Way of Light. Dang, this book is a UNESCO book. All right, 100%. I'm gonna have the team look for this one. By who? Comenius. Once the CyberX team is on it, there's no book that can hide from our research team. We'll find it. That'll be in the Discord by the end of the day. All right, let's continue. In the Hermetic Masonic tradition, the secret identity of Satan is the cosmic force represented in occult lore as emanating from the star Sirius, the so called dog star, Alpha Canis Majoris. In the secret tradition of the Freemasons, Sirius is overwhelmingly identified with a single primary attribute, the bringing of civilization to Earth. The heirs of this magical current were saluted by the Illuminists and master alchemists. Comenius, in his 1668 book, The Way of Light, dedicated to the first scientific organization in Western history, Britain's August Royal Society. In it, Comenius, I don't know if I'm butchering his name or not, addressed the first formal scientists as Illuminati and outlined their scientific purpose, which is to secure the empire of the human mind over matter. Oh, I'm definitely reading that book. That book is probably deep as fuck. Said what? Highlight that one. In a key Rosicrucian description of the city of Utopia, it is shown to be dominated by science and mechanics, and more ominously, by the medical dissection of cadavers. In other words, by the hyperanalytical obsession of rationalism with dead matter and measurement. The utopian city of the Rosicrucians is before us today. New York and Los Angeles, Babylon the Great, and it was planned in 1668 and long before. We have forgotten the depth of the roots of the modern disease. We have accepted the pop pap than anything that predated the more obvious rapacity of modern industrial pollution. Was natural or magical the notion of magic being identified with the priestine? Hence, we have denied ourselves knowledge of the beginning of the rise of the cryptocracy. Historian John Mitchell, it is their immediate concern, having eaten of the tree of knowledge, to apply all their newly acquired arts to constructing a facsimile of the garden, a model of paradise. But there already was an architecture prior to man's imposition of his structures and interventions. This was the architecture of the natural landscape as shaped by God. To claim that to have left it as it was, excuse me, would have been barbarous and backwards. Let me reread that. To claim that to have left it as it was would have been barbarous and backward is symptomatic of the diseased occult mind and its gigantic egotistical pathology. As long as it was left as God created it, it was paradise. Due to our blindness, we feverishly cooperate with the imposition upon the earth of our own version of Eden. Damn, that shit is mind blowing that he just said that. That made me think of a thought that I had the other day. I was outside walking around my neighborhood, and mind you, I live in a very nice neighborhood. I think so. I live in a very nice like area, and the HOA was out to cut the grass, and there was a house at the end of my street, and I've had conversations with this lady in the past, and she owns that land outside of the HOA because she bought the property before the HOA became a thing and they built the neighborhood that I have or that I live in. And so she's the only house in the street that doesn't have to cut her grass because she doesn't abide by the HOA rules. And I was walking past her house the other day and she was outside and I offered her my grass clipper's phone number. And I was like, "Hey, miss, if you need some help, I'll pay for you to have your grass cut if you need it. See that you're elderly. I don't know if if you need help cutting your grass, whatever." And she said, "No, son, I don't need help. Thank you." And I said, "Oh, okay. Can I ask, you know, if you don't need help, like why your grass isn't cut, I would love to help if I can. I'm here to help. I just want you to know that." And she was like, "Oh, it's because I don't want to cut my grass." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And like as soon as she said that, I could see in her eyes that she had a story to tell me. So I was like, enlighten me. And she was like, "Well, this is what all these neighborhoods and all this grass would look like if you just left it alone. Everybody's trying to make it look perfect, cutting it all the time, when in reality, this is what perfection looks like because this is what nature looks like when you just let it do what God intended it to do." And I was like, "Oh shit." It's like light bulb. And this is exactly what this book is talking about. We have this preconceived notion of what Eden looks like. So we try to re architecture and restructure everything that God's already made perfect. And we've made this modern world, this materialistic world that we now live in. Right. So I don't know. That was just a cool way that I could vibe with this book from a personal experience. That was interesting. Settlement leads to the establishment of social hierarchies, to specialization, the development of arts and sciences, the building of temples and houses. For millions of years, men, essentially the same as we are now, lived without these and presumably without feeling the need for them. Tacitus or Tacitus described a German tribe. I don't know if that's Tacitus. I don't know how you pronounce that. I'm going to go with Tacitus, because it rolls off the tongue better. Thucydides described the German tribe that lived entirely without artificial shelter, the phenomena of successive towns built around the same sacred place, the spirit of which became the foundation deity. Receiving the sacrifices offered an explanation, or excuse me, expiation of the crime of settlement and giving the law by which the city was governed. Implicit in this law was a contract between man and God, by which the first was permitted, and a conditional and limited use of land for agriculture and building in return for duties and observance paid to the second. So it was understood by the founding fathers of cities. But as cities expanded, these limitations became more onerous and neglected, with the result that, in the language of Apocalypse, the city became Babylon, the parasitic whore, and proceeds toward destruction. In this belief, the traditional element in ancient Rome objected to expansion beyond the original city boundaries, considering it a breach of the foundation contract. Such counsels were, of course, ignored, and in consequence, Rome, following the career of all previous empires, became Babylon indeed. Civilization tends to grow more elaborate and to make ever greater demands on the earth that sustains it. There comes a time when the old natural devotion to the earth is exchanged for the desire to increase the products of the earth by artificially stimulating its fertility. This stage is marked in history by the appearance of sun gods, divinities of reason, intellect, and centralized government, whose legends refer always to their victories of, I don't know why I said victories like that, victories over dragons, i.e., nature. This policy of artificially increasing the earth's fertility and multiplying the gifts of its spirit instead of accepting what it is given by nature is evident in the staking of the earth's in symbolism, as is seen in the motive of the knight spearing the dragon, which is sometimes viewed as a pinnacle of the victory of light over dark. But we should also be aware that there is an alternate occult reading of this image. This Etherean symbol has been celebrated by pagans and Freemasons as a sign of man's usurpation of natural creation. The staking process is seen by them as a means to pin down the heretofore flowing character of the energy of creation so as to be harnessed and bled by Stonehenge like technology in order to give greater and greater resources to man. The appearance of the sun god signals the introduction of a technology that aims to alter the natural channels of the earth spirit settled population. From all that has recently been discovered about the scientific knowledge and methods of the megalith builders, it appears that their system was in the magical tradition of Egypt, Babylon, and the ancient East at Delphi. By spearing the serpent and localizing its energies, Apollo raised the productivity of the oracle. Every ancient standing stone is like the Amphalos and the temple of Apollo, driven into the head of the telluric serpent current, fixing and augmenting the earth, energies which had formerly fluctuated. Yet in the end, the system became inurious, Onurus, Onros. Fuck, there's another one. I got to come back to that. Onurus. Let's go with that. And ineffective, demanding at least as much from the people as it gave in return. Here is revealed the inevitable betrayal by any institutionalized system of technology of the people who have come to depend on it. The land had become more productive, the people richer and more numerous until, under the influence of cyclical changes in the heavens, the flow of spirit began to withdraw from the temples and take other paths. The later day priests, having neglected the principle of the old astronomical science by which the temples were first sited and planned, and no longer sensitive to the earth's spiritual energies, could only resort to more frantic invocations attended by ever increasing sacrifice. In attempts to repeat the former results, and thus followed as it has on so many occasions at many places over the world, a reaction against the artificial and ever more futile proceedings of the magicians, and a return to simpler ways. It is at this juncture in history that the pre Christian people of Europe were Christianized. The willingness of these hardy, comparatively far more natural and attuned people than we moderns to render themselves susceptible to Christianity is misunderstood today. The assumption is that Christianity simply deceived and coerced the hardy pre Christian Europeans into the fold. But early Christians, like St. Patrick, were accepted because they rid the pagan people of what Michael terms the final access of degenerate priesthood, whose altars demanded ever more sacrificial blood before they could evoke responses from the earth's energies. Michael's nostalgia Michael's nostalgia, excuse me, I don't know why I keep saying Michael, it's Mitchell, my bad. Mitchell's nostalgia for the old astronomical science of the Satarian magicians who supposedly did the rituals properly is misplaced. Manipulation is manipulation, whether clever and precise as in earlier times or lazy and forgetful as in the era when it would be overthrown by Celtic Christianity's gospel of simplicity. Mr. Mitchell can't bring himself to unambiguously condemn the original temperers, the ones who, after all, started the whole journey to Babylon and hell on earth in the first place. These mystical Adams and Eves are referred to by Mitchell as good people, attempting to recreate heaven on earth on the Satarian model of the Golden Age. But Mitchell ought to know that paradise existed once on earth and was destroyed by these good people. Attempts to artificially rebuild it are not only the height of artifice and insanity, but also, as author Machen and H.P. Lovecraft hinted, perhaps indicative of something far more ominous, preparation of the earth for re-inhabitation by demonic entities once expelled. The mythical satanic bringer of civilization to earth was supposed to be an alien from the star system Sirius, around whom the Egyptians and all subsequent Hermetic systems constructed their elaborate and obsessive religious astronomic observances. This star Sirius also served as an astronomic secret code, an allegory of the illusionary quality inherent trickiness of the material world. Let's see how much left we have of this chapter. All right, we're almost done. In actual astronomic magnitude, Sirius is approximately 35 times brighter than our sun. It is regarded in the highest occult circles as an allegous to the hidden god of the cosmos. For just as the star Sirius true magnitude is let me reread that. Just as the star Sirius's true magnitude is dwarfed by the sun of our solar system by means of illusion generated by distance, so too is the influence of Satan in the world obscured behind a welter of churches and lip services to the teachings of Christ. It would be difficult to exaggerate the fanatical degree of attachment the priesthood of Egypt and all subsequent related Hermetic traditions had for Sirius. The entire calendar year of the Egyptians was based upon the rising times of this star. The heliacal rising of Sirius was so important to the ancient Egyptians that gigantic temples were constructed with their main aisles oriented precisely towards the spot on the horizon where Sirius would appear. The light of Sirius would be channeled along the corridor due to the precise orientation to flood the altar in the inner sanctum, as if a pinpointed spotlight had been switched on. This is a blast of light focused from a single star, and it was possible because of the orientation being so incredibly precise, because the temple would be otherwise in total darkness within. In a huge, utterly dark temple, the light of one star focused solely on the altar must have made quite an impact on those present. All right, I think that these are all the rest of these are just direct quotes. Let's skip the direct quotes. Let's go into this. Since everything connected with Sirius seems to form a page in the master key of the cryptocracy's command ideology, we will take into consideration the occult symbolism which mimetically accompanies this stellar double. OTO, leader Kenneth Grant in the Magical Revival writes, the Kabbalistic and true etymological meaning of the word devil will enable us to recover its primal significance. The devil, diabol, or dual one, was the double or twin, doppelganger of the earliest phases of mythology. Primitive man was made aware of the double at times of crisis. The double has long been associated with the ideas of misfortune, disaster, and death. Superstitions connected with twins, doubles, and simulacra dated from remote antiquity. Simulacra. I think I said that right. In the occult of Thelema, Thera and the Beast, 666, and Baphomet of the Knights Templar are two types of the devil, or image of the double power. The double-winged one becomes and combines the solar and hermetic alchemical functions of Theron and the Baphomet, and both of these functions involve the formula of the beast and the woman conjoined. Other hybrid creatures also symbolize the devil on an account of their dual nature. The primal type of duality and unity was supplied by the dog and the ape. Isis, Sirius, and Osiris, Orion, emerged in one image as the Synocophalos, probably butchering that. I'll highlight and come back to it. This was the sacred dog headed baboon used in ancient Egypt as a type of time and the Holy One. OTO leader Grant is here delineating the negative side of the twin or double. There is, of course, a positive side of which he is aware, but this positive aspect pertains to a secret of psychic self defense, which Grant was not prepared to divulge. Suffice it to say that in its negative aspect, the double represents deceit and illusion, Janus the Two Faced. This was symbolized in one of the headquarter buildings of the conspirators in John F. Kennedy's assassination, which housed both right winger Guy Ben Astor's detective agency and the left wing Fair Play for Cuba committee. The building was located on the corner of Camp and Lafayette Streets in the New Orleans area. Lee Harvey Oswald worked both sides of the two-faced buildings. In alchemy, a two-headed adrogen presides over the beginning and the end of every age and every magical process. According to the astronomer John A. Eddy, the rock circle located near Laval, Wyoming, known as the Big Horn Medicine Wheel, is aligned with the rising of Sirius. The astronomical alignment of the Big Horn Medical Wheel was and has been since 1974. The Heliacal rising of Sirius was also important to other ancient peoples. Here is a description by the ancient Greek poet Aratus of the rising of Sirius, often known as the dog star as it is, and the constellation Canis, or dog. The tip of its or his terrible jaw is marked by a star that keenest of all blazes with a searing flame in him, man calls Sirius. Throughout Latin literature, there are many references to the dog days, which followed the heliacal rising of Sirius in the summer. These hot, parched days were thought by that time to derive some of their ferocity and dryness from the searing of Sirius. Further on in the study, we shall see that a key ritual sacrifice intended to imprint the group mind of the masses of the 1970s in the son of Sam murderers involved in the widely disseminated claim that the mad killers had taken orders from a dog named Sam. The capture of one of the killers in the cult, David Brockwitz, coincided with the coming of the dog days of summer on August 1977. And Satanist Albert Pike's eighth degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the focus of worship is on the blazing star, as symbolized by the pentagram, and Pike identifies Sirius as the grand builder or great architect of Freemasonry. The symbol or alchemy or alchemically sigil of the armed enforcer of the Code of Hammurabi, which was the law of the Empire of Babylon, and the successor to Sumer, was the five pointed star or pentagram. The distinguishing character of the Babylonian law code was that the laws were not the same for the rich and the poor. This star also happens to be the symbol of the armed enforcers of modern America's laws, and it was also a symbol of the enforcers of the communist regime in Russia. Is it an accident that both the army of the Soviet Union and the policemen of America wear the secret symbol of Sirius? It's a good question. There's a lot of confusing shit in this, but I like the way he ended that because he started to lose me there for a second. Sometimes these books blabble on. I think that's oh no, this is like we're on the last page. Let's finish this off. Sirius is emblematic of hidden power and secret allegiances to an invisible empire. The order of the star is thus the order of the eye of Set. The sun behind the sun, the star is Sirius. Sirius is the power behind the sun. Our work is the rediscovery of the Sumerian tradition, the crux of magical significance for the present magical revival, the key supplied by the Sumerian tradition, which involved the worship of Shatan or Shatian, the astronomical vehicle of which was Sirius. Shaitan, or I'm assuming that was where Satan came from, maybe Shaitan, 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 was one of the names of the devil god of Sumer. A civilization so old the adjective ancient seems hopelessly inadequate as a description for it. However, it was not too antediluvian for Thomas Harris, who put it into mouths of two gypsies in his 1999 bestseller, Annabel. At the end of the chapter in 26, the gypsy woman Romalia, open espying the monstrous protagonist, Dr. Lecter declares that is the devil, Shaitan, son of the morning. I've seen him now. At the end of chapter 29, the gypsy Esmeralda curses a policeman by spitting on his shadow because he handed another gypsy over to Shaitan. The name Shaitan is a former of Set, one of the Murad names, in this case, Egyptian. For the entity Sirius, Sothis, the star of the goddess Isis, as well as that of the jackal headed deity Anubis. Set is represented as having the body of a human with thin curved snout and square shaped ears, and sometimes with a tail. Set through its roots, Sut literally denotes soot, the black filth of sin. In Egypt, Set, Sirius, was known as the dog, and Set and Satan. John Mitchell, the alchemist, aimed to recapture the spirit of Mercurius or Mercurius as the mobile agent in their operations, and they spoke of fixing it, using the imagery of the stake driven through the earth serpent, by which means their predecessors, alchemists of elemental cosmic forces, had attempted to raise the subtile spirit of the earth. All these good people shared the noblest ambition to invoke again the golden age on earth. No doubt in time they did much to promote human convenience and comfort, and civilizations have been humanized by such efforts. But their falls have thereby only been delayed. For the human spirit, like the spirit of the earth, is a natural wanderer and does not forever accept domesticity. Attempts to fix nature's volatile principles will always be made, and the spirit may for a time accept the ways imposed upon it by human nature in its material aspect. But sooner or later it will prefer its own ways and will take them, whatever obstacles are put in its path. So we observe that Saturn and his golden age, architecture, both mental and physical, came only after the end of Eden, after Saturnarius had separated the unity of heaven and earth by means of his fateful sickle. What do we have behind the cover story about the workers' paradise in the Soviet Union? We have the sickle, the very occult symbol of the bisection or bisection of heaven and earth, the very symbol of the destruction of Eden by demonic, accelerated material and temporal decay, and the false philosophies which generate division between humanity's sense of itself and identification with God's divine creation under the cover of slogans of unity. In other words, we have a grotesque mockery of the very principle touted. This macabre or ignorance borders on the clownish for those initiates or self initiates who have the wit to see it. Bravo. That was a phenomenal chapter. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo in there that, you know, some people might just push aside, but for the most part, that was a banger fucking like 3 chapters we just picked through. Lots of smacks or slaps in the face for some who might be hearing this stuff for the first time, but nonetheless, a great read. I found it to be of interest, so I thought that I'd share it with you all today. This was The Secret Societies in Psychological Warfare by Michael Hoffman. Definitely give this one a read. Again, here at CyberX, we're not here to tell you all that this information is correct or not correct. We're just here to recommend books. What you all do with the information after we recommend it is, of course, up to you. With that being said, many blessings to you guys. Be cognizant, be aware out there, and I'll see you all in the next video breakdown.